as a journalist from Vienna, he goes to Paris for the Albert Dreyfus case. I'm sure many of you know about it, etc. Dreyfus was accused by the French government of being, are you ready for this, a German spy. Okay? All right, which was all nonsense, just made up and so on and so forth. And he began to say, hey, I got a great idea for all of you guys who are worried about all these Jewish workers coming to your country with their socialism, their demand for rights, etc. Send the Jews to Palestine. Well, it sounded good to a lot of the imperialists because it was obvious to them that the Turkish Empire was called the sick man of Europe, that it was dying, and somebody was going to take over Palestine. So when World War I broke out, the Germans couldn't call for a Jewish state in Palestine because they were allied to the Turks. But the British, who were opposed to them, said, all right, we're going to set up a Jewish state in Palestine. Now they did that not because they were pro-Jewish, but because the Jews who had migrated from Russia into Britain and into America and other places, but those places in particular, were opposed to the British during World War I because the British were allied to Tsarist Russia, which was anti-Semitic. They had fled from Tsarist Russia. Okay? So the British decided, listen, we'll try to overcome this hostility to us in World War I by calling for a Jewish state. Now, in the real world, most Jews in America did not support Britain because of the call for a Jewish state in Palestine, because they still knew Britain is allied to Tsarist Russia, and this is just demagoguery to win our vote, to get our support for the war. Okay, but finally Britain wins and takes over and declares, okay, we're going to set up a Jewish state in Palestine. Now, another thing that happened at the same time, and most people aren't, even most Arabs aren't familiar with it, is that the British were also using the Hashemites who at that time were running Mecca as opponents of the Turks. You know, it's time for an Arab state in Arabia. Okay? So you had simultaneously the British Christians, okay, remember, 2 minutes, okay. You had simultaneously the British calling for a Jewish state in Palestine and an Arab state in Arabia, all demagoguery, all right? But finally, they win, okay, they say, all right, Palestine's going to become a Jewish state. Now, one thing that's very important to remember, or you don't know it, when they were talking about Palestine at that time, they meant what we call Palestine and Jordan. That was Palestine. That was the British mandate in 1918, you know, so that's what the League of Nations gave. But then a problem occurred for the British, namely that Ibn Saud kicked the Hashemites out of Mecca and set up Saudi Arabia. Since the Hashemites had been British pawns, the British had to do something to help the Hashemites. So they gave Jordan to the Hashemites. All right? Fine and dandy, except that now the Zionists are confronted with a remnant. They just took half the country, half of Palestine away from us. Most of the Zionist leaders said, let them have it. There are no Jews in Jordan. Who cares? But one guy said, no, you got to say to the British, give it back to us. And that one guy was a man named Vladimir Jabotinsky. Now, why is he important? Because Netanyahu's father later became Jabotinsky's secretary. All right? So when you're talking about Netanyahu, if you want to know what's going on in Netanyahu's head, you read Vladimir Jabotinsky. And what Jabotinsky said, he wrote an article called The Iron Wall, very simple. We have to demand that the British give us back Jordan because we are a colonial movement and the natives will oppose us as long as they think there's any chance of driving us out. Since the British have given back Jordan to the Arabs, that will inspire the Palestinians on the west side of the Jordan River to keep fighting, etc. All right? So you gotta revise the British and Zionist policy. And Jabotinsky's movement and Netanyahu's movement is known as the Zionist revisionist movement. And that's what they're talking about. Okay. Now, so Jabotinsky became, thank you, 2 minutes. Jabotinsky became very upset at the British, and he began to look for a substitute mandatory. The Zionists were simply too small and too weak at that time to run any part of Palestine on their own. They needed an imperial protector. So he began to look to Mussolini in Italy. Okay? Now, he was not, Jabotinsky was not a fascist, but what he liked about Mussolini was that Mussolini knew what to do to Arabs. He used poison gas against them in Libya. All right? So the next thing you know is that in the 30s, Mussolini invites a couple of hundred Zionist revisionists to go to his naval academy. All right? And Jabotinsky told them, look, we're not fascists, we're not fascists. But they ignored him. Dozens of them joined the Italian Fascist Party. Okay? But in 1936, something came along that changed everything. Namely, the Spanish working class and the fascists began to fight in Spain. And Mussolini realized, if the left wins in Spain, that will inspire my workers to try to overthrow me. But I'm not strong enough to beat the left alone in Spain, so I have to ally myself with Hitler. But if I ally myself with Hitler, I have to kick the Zionists out of my naval academy. All right? So that's what he did. And then a piece of the Zionist revisionists decided, wait, the only reason Mussolini kicked us out is really because the Jews were ungrateful to him. Most of them remained anti-fascist. So when World War II broke out, Yitzhak Shamir, who later became the Prime Minister of Israel, and his Stern Gang actually proposed to the Nazis that they, the Stern Gang, allied themselves with Hitler against Britain in World War II. Now, I have to end because our man here followed orders and gave me the 2 minutes. But, no. Let me just, I'm ending now because we got plenty of time to discuss the whole. But to get the picture, that understand what I gave you right now, this last 20 minutes, I would say 95% of the Jews in the United States and 90% of the Zionists know nothing about the history that I just gave you. All of which is facts, easily documented. All right? Once we start talking and documenting and putting on the internet Jabotinsky's talk about we're colonialists, okay? Once we start putting on the internet the Zionist revisionists singing the fascist national anthem in Italy, that will start changing Jewish public opinion in the United States towards Zionism and American public opinion towards Zionism. I close on that. I got lots more to say, but you can do that in the hallway, so to speak.